Hello and welcome to the Sunday Wire. I'm Bryan McClain, otherwise known as Hesher from AlternateCurrentRadio.com. Welcome to this weekly news omnibus broadcasted live out of Alternate Current Radio and 21stCenturyWire.com. Thank you for joining us for this live broadcast. It is October the 13th, 2024. We're getting closer. We are getting much closer to the big event here. Election day coming up. We are getting there. It's going to be nice to have this behind us, don't you think? Don't you think? It's starting to get to the point in the cycle where people are dragging you aside and saying, aren't you going to vote for this? Aren't you going to vote for that? What about this? What about that? A lot of that going on right now. Was out in town yesterday here in Central Texas, and the many of the local businesses were having Trump sales, selling Trump gear, Trump T-shirts, all kind of stuff. And man, I can't wait for this to be over. It's going to be nice. This has been quite possibly the longest election cycle, at least it feels that way to me, that I've ever experienced. Everybody's kind of like waiting to see what the selection did I say selection? I mean election results are going to be. Are we going to have 2025 kickoff with a Trump presidency and switch gears in this country a little bit? Or are we going to continue down the path that we're headed down right now with regards to the power politics here in the United States? So I don't know if you're feeling like me and just hurry up and get it over with or what, but certainly it's going to be eventful. We've already had, two assassination attempts on Donald Trump. We're seeing the absolute insanity of the Harris and Walz campaign. I mean, this stuff is just getting absolutely ridiculous. Holy crap. Did you guys see? Uh, what a great headline. Colin Linebarger writes this headline. What's wrong, Doc? Self-described hunter Tim Walz looks like Elmer Fudd while trying to load his gun and gets destroyed on social media. Yeah, he sure did. It's been really funny to watch this video go live here and go wide on social media. Here's I'll just show you this real quick. Here he is, Tim Walz, trying to figure out how to load his shotgun. Apparently he's out pheasant hunting. All right, so out there pheasant hunting, but doesn't seem to really understand the manual of arms on his weapon here. And boy, oh boy, this probably wouldn't be a big deal if, well, first off, he probably wouldn't even be out here doing this if it hadn't have been for that whole Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris debate where when asked about guns, Harris said, Tim Walz and I are gun owners. Well, this gun owner doesn't particularly seem to understand his weapon very well. So that's pretty funny. Also, I never do this, but Spore and I actually watched I think it's the second episode of the most recent season of Saturday Night Live because there was a lot of political stuff in there, some big names, and my goodness, SNL went. They obviously go hard against Trump, and obviously they have their twisted political agenda that they do over there at SNL, but they really were throwing quite a bit of shade at Harris and Walz as well. So it was, funny, not funny sort of broadcast that they did. A lot of big names playing characters. Who's that guy? The comedian Jim Gaffigan, I think, played Tim Walz. Did a really good job with it. He makes a great Tim Walz. But it has been like, where are we at right now? The mainstream media, the mass media, of course, they do their best to be, display that anti-Trump sort of vibe. but they're certainly not doing a whole lot of favors to the Harris-Walz campaign either. So, and the polling is always dubious, but very interesting to look at right now. And it looks like men around the country right now, at least one of the stats I'm seeing is that that whole white dudes for Harris thing is not really working out. We're not. It seems like the male vote in the country is backing away from Harris and Walls. If there is such a thing as an undecided at this point, I'm not sure. It seems like a lot of Americans have power politics fatigue to a great extent at this point right now. So, how this is all going to wash out, how this is all going to play out, I don't know. Uh, we've also seen some new DOJ lawsuits suing states for not allowing people who can't prove their citizenship the ability to vote, which is interesting. Need to prove your citizenship to do all kind of things, but apparently the DOJ is very concerned about the voting. Right? They want to make sure that people without IDs can vote. So some energy going into that. That's very interesting, but not surprising either. Um, but I think like many of you, it's like, can we just get this over with? Please. This has been the longest, most uh I don't know. I don't know. This whole cycle has just been a little bit bonkers, a little bit much for a lot of people to handle. And what's it going to be? What's it going to end up looking like? Neil says, white dudes for Harris equals affluent hipsters for woke technocracy. There you go. There's someone plugged in. Yes, the woke technocracy regime may continue. I don't personally think that Harris Walls could possibly win this legitimately, but I'm not a person that really thinks voting happens legitimately after all the interviews I've done on State of the Nation and the Bryan McClain show, at Today's News Talk in the last 2.5 years. There's just too many vulnerabilities in the system, all the way from cyber vulnerabilities to Dropbox vulnerabilities and scams and schemes. Just too many holes in the bucket at this point to fill it up with legitimate votes from American citizens. But who knows? Some theorize that maybe Trump is the plan, and we shall see. We shall see. Others, sort of those holding on to the hopium that the voting system still works. Well, they think that there's just going to be a tsunami, right? A red wave supporting Trump and Vance. And maybe that's the case. I don't know. We shall see. It's going to be really interesting to see uh, this whole thing happen. And, there's been so much talk about how Trump will not be allowed to re enter the White House. So who knows? Who knows? Maybe the red wave people are right and they won't be able to cheat their way out of this. And if that becomes the case, then what happens? Then what happens to all those people in Washington, D.C., and in the mass media cartel and in the technocratic realm? I'm talking to you, Google. We saw your little staff meeting there after Trump's first election. So we know your take on this, and that is never again. So if it ends up in that situation, one must wonder what this is going to look like and how exactly Trump will be stopped, because it seems like all the lawfare is falling flat right now. We didn't see the sentencing happen, and Trump is still out doing the Trump stump. So that's pretty interesting. Trump went back to Butler, Pennsylvania. The crowd was quite massive. They weren't able to hide that. It looked like it was, by some estimates, over 50,000 people there supporting Trump and Vance. That was a lot of fanfare, wasn't it? Elon Musk was up there. Uh, yeah, all the big names were there in Butler. We're still Yeah, we got a lot to talk about in the Middle East, and Basil Valentine is going to join us later in the program. And maybe, just maybe, we'll get a call in from Patrick Henningsen today. Still standing by to wait and see if that's going to happen. So, yeah, it's great to have you here with us. The other thing I'm finding highly interesting right now in the social media zeitgeist, if you will, is the mainstreaming of talk about weather modification. We had Hurricane Helene come through and do just an incredible amount of damage. We're still trying to suss out exactly how tragic the damage has been from Helene, but in North Carolina in particular, very, very bad, very scary scenes. I've seen some estimates of up to 4,000 body bags being sent there, and still seeing on the ground reports, social media reports, TikTok videos, Instagram videos of people talking about just how bad this this has been. And some really strange reports too. My goodness. Reports of, FEMA. Let's talk about FEMA for a second. What are they doing? People want to know what FEMA is doing. Why are they out there? And are they actively hampering relief efforts and recovery efforts? I saw this one by Ben Swan here. And let me just share this one with you. This is interesting here. He's got some video. Let's take a look at it.
In Western North Carolina. And
here we go.
That was reportedly a black FEMA helicopter intentionally hovering low over a volunteer collection site in Western North Carolina and disrupting the work being done there. Individuals on the ground claim it was in retaliation for volunteers not allowing FEMA to confiscate their supplies. Here again, another video, you can see an unmarked black helicopter doing what's called a rotor wash, destroying supplies and disrupting distribution, this time in Burnsville, North Carolina. It's been caught on video twice. So why is FEMA wasting time and supplies with behavior like this? Between disrupting supply sites, refusing to drive around road closed signs, and threatening volunteers for trying to help, FEMA seems to be creating more harm than actual help.
All right, that's disturbing if true. It's one thing for FEMA to run cover for natural disasters, if we can call them that. We'll get to that in a moment here, but very, very disturbing to think that they might be out there actively stopping people from bringing supplies, bringing aid, using their helicopter assets to destroy pallets of food and water, other consumables that people desperately need. Is that what FEMA's doing? Is that really what's going on? Because it's not just this one report from Ben Swan that I've seen to flag this concept up. It's many, many reports out there floating around all over the place. There's a lot of TikTok videos about it. Yeah. North Carolina National Guard Black Hawk crew grounded in rotor wash incident over Helene aid. This is out of CBS 17 here. North Carolina National Guard said a Black Hawk helicopter crew was grounded after an incident in which they flew low over a Hurricane Helene donation and supply area, blowing over 3 tents and scattering items in the air. Video of the incident surfaced after the copter hovered over the supply area in Burnsville. This is last Sunday, I believe. One person who recorded the video said the incident seemed deliberate. So here you go. Video footage comes out of it. You got to love this part where the mass media, goes out and does something like this, where it's like, oh, don't worry, that crew's been grounded. Well, that crew is only one of many that I've seen doing activities like this. We've heard about roadways being closed, aid not being allowed in. I have a colleague who has a really big TikTok following, and he actually did some crowdfunding and organized some aid to go down there, and found that the trucks that uh, he had commissioned to bring in supplies were disallowed by FEMA from entering the area. That's about over a week old now. I don't know what the update is on that. But there's a lot of videos out there that you can look at about this. And, it just, again, I think I mentioned this last week, but it makes me think about FEMA's activities in Maui in the wake of the fire, right? These horrible fire leveled the entire town of Lahaina, and FEMA's there relatively quickly. But what do they do? What do they do? Well, they cordon off the entire town. They put up black fencing around the entire area and they disallow anyone from coming in. So if you're a business owner in Lahaina, if you live in the area, you're not allowed to go in. And as far as I know, we've talked to Barry Nesbaum many times about this. He's a resident there, and he's been on the ground for us and coming to the TNT show that I was hosting and talking about it, and on other outlets and other shows on TNT. And the behavior from FEMA is, I don't know. It's the kind of thing that makes you look back to, like InfoWars and their original reporting on FEMA, like back in the day. And, what are these people doing? Let's not forget FEMA is under the umbrella of Homeland Security, right? And so that means Alejandro Mayorkas is basically the overarching boss of not just FEMA, but also Border Patrol and all the other agencies, 3 and 4 letter agencies that exist under the umbrella of Department of Homeland Security. So if Homeland Security to Mayorkas and to the federal government means um, covering up natural disasters or unnatural disasters, that's not a good look. That's not something a lot of American taxpayers are going to be cool with. I know the people of Lahaina are not cool with the way they've been treated. It's well over a year now since that fire blazed through there and destroyed that beautiful oceanfront town. None of the buildings have been reconstructed. Nobody has been allowed to go in there and start the process. No permits have been given, and they are basically making up fake laws saying that you can't even take a picture. You can't fly a drone over it. You can't have your cell phone out taking video or, photographic footage coming into Lahaina. There's only one road in and out, completely blocked off. They are arresting people for breaking this. I don't even want to call it a law because it's not a law, an edict, a rule. It's like, what is this? What actually is this? Because the people that have been uh, arrested for it, there's no law that they can charge them with breaking. So, First Amendment violations uh, abound, when it comes to FEMA. And then of course there was if you remember back to what happened in Louisiana years ago, not good reports from FEMA. What we're seeing here with FEMA is disturbing a lot of people, and people in North Carolina in particular say that FEMA is nowhere to be found. And if you can find them, they seem to be actively disrupting a lot of rescue and recovery efforts. So, keeping an eye on this. But this has really brought to the forefront the idea of weather modification, which is very interesting to me because a lot of people have been talking about weather modification for a very long time and have been completely shunned for it, called conspiracy theorists. They didn't care if you have the documents. No, didn't care. Didn't care about that at all. But now uh, it seems that it is totally normal kitchen table talk now to discuss weather modifications. So it's been very interesting to watch on social media all the mommy bloggers and TikTokers and young folks out there internet sleuths looking into things like the ICRC's 1976 Convention on the Prohibition of Military or any hostile use of environmental modification techniques. My goodness, 1976. So this topic has been out there in official white papers and UN documents for decades. Let's see, document number 17119, Multilateral Convention on the Prohibition of Military or any other use of hostile environmental modification techniques, adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on the 10th of December, 1976. How about that? And you can find things like this on the United Nations Treaty Collection website here. You can find that particular one, that 1976 one, talking about, and that's at treaties.un.org if you want to read it for yourself. There's also the, let's see here, Bureau of International Security and Non-Proliferation, signed in Geneva, May 18, 1977, entered into force October 5th, 1978. Very interesting, and then you've got the all the patents, right? Of course, the fact checkers come out, and this is fun. This is the fact checkers come out and they say debunking Helene response myths, right? You got that at Chuck Edwards. Over at CBS News, you got this headline: No, the government is not controlling the weather. Quote, it's so stupid, it's got to stop, end quote, says Biden. You've got USA Today. NexRad, HARP, and Doppler radar can't control hurricanes. Fact check. And I'm not sure which outlet this is, but their headline is fact checking the viral conspiracies in the wake of Hurricane Helene. So a lot of that going on out there. Really interesting to see this. Here's one. Shout out to Wild Heart Alive. They reposted this one or posted this original post. I'm not sure, but it goes, I asked ChatGPT, can you think of any reasons the government would find it advantageous to manipulate the weather and devastate a remote area? Okay, that's a good one. Fun with ChatGPT here. So ChatGPT replies, theoretically, if one were to consider reasons why a government might find it advantageous to manipulate weather patterns, a few scenarios could be speculated. 1. Displacement for development. A government might see an opportunity to clear land for development or infrastructure projects, viewing a natural disaster as a means to relocate populations and repurpose land. Interesting take right there by the Chat GPT. Now, it doesn't go quite as far as what we're actually seeing if this is the case, because it's talking about relocating populations. What we saw in Maui and what we've seen with Helene is a decimation of populations. We don't even know how many people died in Lahaina. The official numbers float right around 100 a year later. But when you've got entire families, entire structures, homes, buses, automobiles, where everybody inside of them are gone and there's no one left to report them missing, you got to wonder, if these numbers are being downplayed. ChatGPT also said another reason, too, resource redistribution. By destabilizing a region, a government could justify reallocating resources to other areas perceived as more strategic or beneficial to certain industries, impacting agriculture or water supplies to exert control over local economies. Could be a motive for influencing weather. So I guess they didn't wokeify the Chat GPT bot quite as much as they maybe should have here, because this is an interesting one, especially if you're following the stories about the lithium mines and the quartz crystal mines and processing areas in the damaged areas of Helene. Yeah, so we got that going on. What else did ChatGPT said? Number 3, political gain. In a hypothetical scenario, creating chaos might allow a government to consolidate power or distract from other issues, portraying themselves as the sole savior. Well, if that's how they're trying to portray themselves, maybe that explains why that Hilo crew from FEMA got grounded, right? Got to keep the narrative going. Government's the sole savior. FEMA's there to help, right? Number 4 that the Chat GPT dropped is distraction, creating a crisis to divert attention from domestic issues or political scandals. Do we have any of those going on? Yes, a constant flood of them. We've got this atrocious situation in the Middle East, in Gaza, in Lebanon, and Yemen. It seems to be spreading. People are getting hip to what's going on there. There's the issue, of course, of the election. And please, please, if you're entertaining these theories, I'm right there with you, but don't make it a partisan issue. This is one thing I think should be clear to a lot of people. This is not Democrats controlling the weather or anything like that. I do think distraction is a great example. Um, yeah. So let's see what else we got here. Chat GPT's number 5. This one's interesting. Military testing. Experimenting with geoengineering or climate manipulation technologies under the guise of natural events. Some theories suggest that weather modification could be used as a form of warfare or to test new technologies in real world conditions. Disrupting enemy supply lines or operations during a conflict could also provide strategic military intelligence. We got a couple more. ChatGPT is just full of ideas here. Number 6. Oh, here we go. I think I brought this one up a little early because, whew. All right, here we go. Population management. Reducing the population in a remote area might be seen as a way to manage overpopulation or, again, relocate people for strategic reasons. So, yeah, what's going to happen? Everybody in Lahaina's been relocated, and the population in Lahaina was certainly reduced. And I think it's pretty obvious that the population in North Carolina has been reduced also. Number 7, looks like Basil Valentine is going to join us in a moment here. Number 7, environmental policy. In some cases, altering weather might be viewed as a means to enforce environmental regulations or land use policies. Again, I'll reference Lahaina here because there were water rights issues that were in courts and going the way of the locals in Maui at the time of that fire. And now those issues are pretty much dead in the water. We don't even know who is going to be allowed to rebuild, who the residents of Lahaina are going to be. Number 8, economic gain. Devastating certain areas could allow for the development of new projects like infrastructure under the guise of recovery. So, again, that leads to those lithium mines and things like that. We've also got geopolitical influence. Weakening a region might enhance a government's leverage over neighboring countries or groups. We've got scientific research, governments conducting scientific research on ecosystems and climate change, and economic manipulation. Disrupting agriculture in a remote area, for example, could drive up prices for certain commodities, benefiting specific industries or companies. And also seeing a lot of reports that that Mamala's husband is a big investor and benefactor in some of these companies, for example, the lithium miners. So, very, very interesting to see all this stuff going on. And then you can look into all of the patents. My goodness, we have patents going back to the 1800s. All right. Things titled like method of producing rain, uh, atomizing attachment for airplane engine exhaust, means for producing high potential electrical discharges, artificial production of fog, rainmaker, that was 1913, electrical systems and methods, protecting from poisonous gases in warfare, airplane spray equipment. I could go on and on and on. 1936, method of dispelling fog. This is a very, very long list, and it covers so many different patents here. It's really kind of staggering how many are out there. So I still see a lot of people saying, oh, they can't manipulate the weather. That's ridiculous. But just go and look at the patents. There's literally hundreds of them. I just clicked through almost 9 pages of them, maybe more. I'm still clicking through them. My goodness. Uh, here's one. Here's a more recent one. May 18th, 2023, patent 20230149876. Coated chloride salt particles and methods of making and using the same. The one right before it, also 2023, device for unmanned aerial vehicles to deploy a rainfall catalytic bomb. Wow. All right. A lot of people talking about HARP, a lot of people talking about these issues right now. So, very interesting to see that Overton window nudged over or forced over. I'm not sure which, to make this sort of a mainstream topic. All right, let's get off that one for a minute and let's welcome Basil Valentine to the Sunday Wire. Basil, welcome to Sunday Wire. How you doing?
Very well, thanks, Hesher. It's great to be back where it all began just over 10 years ago.
Isn't that amazing? It really is great to have you with us today. So I'm just going through I'm very interested in this resurgence of conversation on social media about weather manipulation. A lot of people putting together some pretty interesting points about this, but we had, Hurricane Milton come through Florida. It ended up being a Category 3, caused a lot of damage, but not near as bad as people were uh, concerned about. I mean, it's still a lot. It was some crazy footage out of there. I saw alligators in the street and alligators in people's homes. There's a lot of alligator reports and videos out there, but a lot of damage, and it's really brought this concept back to the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back 30, 40 years to some of the original sort of late 20th century conspiracy research around HARP, the ultra high frequency machine that's involved with something called the net. I'm not talking about the internet, talking about a frequency fence put in place over Earth to stop people accessing higher dimensional frequencies for the purposes of enlightenment and humanity realizing that we are all one, that our fates are all intertwined and all the rest of it, and the big switch up that a lot of us had thought would be on the cards for the 21st century. Weather manipulation is another aspect of that. I mean, the simple fact is we don't know whether these hurricanes are being steered or even whipped up in the first place. So we can speculate as much as we like. People have been saying, it's very unusual for hurricanes to originate in the west of the Gulf of Mexico, as Milton did, and then head eastwards. That's very, very unusual path. They generally form further out in the Atlantic or to the south and then swing north up towards Florida. So, other people have been saying, of course, this could be aimed at areas where there are a lot of Trump voters, Florida and North Carolina in particular, swing states, and it was rural North Carolina that suffered the worst. Hundreds of people were killed. That didn't really get the press attention that it deserved. If hundreds of Americans were killed in any other context, if they were killed overseas as a result of bombing or something, then, wouldn't hear the end of it for weeks. But the fact hundreds died all seems to have been brushed under the carpet very quickly. But they were, after all, mostly hillbilly types, were they not? They're not important people. If that had happened perhaps even if it had happened in the Northeast, if it happened in Boston or something, you wouldn't have heard the end of it. So I think there's a sort of even within the United States, there's a hierarchy of suffering, isn't there? And
yeah, absolutely. And I noticed that the mass media and the politicians are involved in sort of the shaping of, the resurgence of this narrative, if you will. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Representative Greene, she put on her X account, quote, "Yes, they can control the weather," end quote. And that started a bit of a fire. And it was even brought up on Saturday Night Live. They quoted her and tried to make an idiot out of her. And of course, she doesn't go to the trouble to put some of the evidence that I was talking about, and just uses the word "they," which insinuates that Democrats are doing it strictly for voting purposes, and to penalize people in largely conservative areas. But it's really weird to see that politicians willing to say things like that, and then of course the mass media using it as a bounce, a rebound board for further politicizing these kind of ideas.
yeah, I mean, what it does do though is indicate the extent to which on that kind of issue the Overton window has shifted to the point where somebody like that, admittedly she's an outlier in Congress, but nevertheless she can say that on social media. A lot of people will have agreed with her, or certainly they would have thought about it for the first time. Whereas, 20, 30 years ago, the subject of weather manipulation was only reserved for people who read Bill Cooper's book or something. Do you know what I mean? It was just not a subject at all. So we don't know is the answer. As I say, I mean, tied up with chemtrails, with HAARP, with various other aspects of secret technology, it leads you towards things like the secret space program and other sort of deep conspiracy events, which I'm fascinated by. But actual hard evidence, other than the occasional whistleblower testimony, is very hard to come by.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope everybody's doing okay. I hope all our friends, families, listeners, and viewers out there that have been affected by these devastating hurricanes are hanging in there and doing okay. Seeing a lot of, I was mentioning before you came on, seeing disturbing reports about large numbers of body bags going to certain places in North Carolina. So very concerning. And, I'm glad you pointed out the reporting in the mass media. It's like, if that is the case, if it really does require 4,000 body bags or more, you would really think that the mass media would be talking about it, even in just a mainstream sort of way. Oh, this is a tragedy. Here's how to help, that kind of thing. Here are some of the stories.
Or, of course, exploiting it for the climate emergency agenda.
Yeah. Right. They seem to really lean into that one. They did that at the VP debate, tried to frame Helene around a scaffolding of climate change as the topic. And it's just like, can we get JD Vance to screw up and say climate change is fake, or, something like this? And he navigated that pretty well, but it was pretty obvious what the ABC presenters were trying to do and how they were trying to manage that narrative.
Yeah. So, where is this story? Quite simply, I mean, usually with something as major as that, there's follow up for a couple of weeks afterwards. But from what I can see, this side of it's completely disappeared already. But then again, the news cycle does move so much faster than it used to. That's something we've all come to recognize in the last few years. The stories are over before they've begun, almost. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Oh, truly. I mean, look at the assassination.
24 hours, and that's it.
Yeah, look at the assassination attempts on Donald Trump as a great example. It's like they were just news blips. They're barely talked about anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And will there be a third?
Yeah,
not over yet.
Yeah, a lot of people are wondering, because there's this whole talking point that's been going around for a long time, since the first time Trump was elected, but this talking point that they will not allow him to go back into the White House.
And yet at the moment, the polls in the crucial swing states are starting to move against Harris. For the first time ever, Democrats launched an attack ad aimed directly at Jill Stein and Butch Ware of the Green Party, because they've been making inroads, particularly in states like Michigan. The Abandon Harris campaign officially endorsed Jill Stein. So, that prompted Democrats to basically say, look, voting for this woman is like voting for Donald Trump. And they're also trying to shame men, aren't they? I don't know if you've seen that ad featuring various types of sort of all-American guys, including one who says he eats carburetors for breakfast. And, Obama's been out trying to shame black people for not voting for Harris, and indeed claim that men are sexist, of course, if you don't support Kamala Harris. The only possible reason why is because you're a sexist, not because she's an imbecile.
Yeah, right. I mean, Obama using the Joe Biden, if you ain't voting for me, you ain't black sort of vote, smacks a little bit harder coming from Barack, doesn't it?
I mean, it's signs of increasing desperation among Democrats. I think for all that Trump is starting to show signs of wear and tear, shall we say. He glitched at a recent rally, didn't he? He's not not absolutely on the best form of his life. For Harris, it's getting even worse.
Yeah, it really is. And I noticed there also, I saw this on Saturday Night Live and on mainstream media, mass media cartel news reports. But they're definitely shifting into sort of the same kind of stealing the question, the talking point about his mental fitness, his age, people asking for medical reports and things like this, which of course those same pundits and analysts were not doing when Joe Biden's, falling down the stairs and crashing bicycles, glitching out.
Yeah, exactly. But, we can expect that all the way up to and past election day. It's, what is it now? 3 weeks or so away?
Yeah, we're almost there.
I've described it as a faction fight because an enormous amount, of course, from ordinary Americans will not change, and there's sort of 80% of things on which Trump and Harris are broadly in agreement. But there is an important 20% where they disagree, and they do both represent different, very powerful factions in American society. Trump obviously represents sort of the traditional America to some extent of, mum's apple pie and the Midwest and the, Scandinavians and Germans, and that still form a very sizable chunk of the United States population. And of course, Harris sort of claims to represent people of color, women, a different type of America, the new multicolored America, woke America, if you like. So there's, culturally and socially, there are these important differences between these factions, and they both have to build coalitions big enough to get them over the line. But of course, we've always got this, rigged election problem. So it's like it's a circus, but it's also a charade to a large extent.
Yeah, it really is. And I think a lot of people, if there is such a thing as an undecided voter, I don't know about that. What I mostly see is people walking away from one party or the other, or walking away from the entire voting experience, or, just even following this because it's gotten so arduous over the years. It's just so much garbage involved. But I think a lot of people are kind of walking away from the Harris concept at this point because of some of those things that you just mentioned. It's like people have been accused of racism and cultural appropriation and this and that, and it's like, well, what do people see Harris doing. They see her doing the same thing. They see her doing her best Hillary Clinton, picking up a different accent when she goes to different places, telling different stories about her background, lying, claiming that she's a gun owner, and that her and Walls are gun owners and hunters and all this stuff. They
Oh, that's
like
right. They've had Walls out shooting pheasants in an orange jacket. It didn't look very convincing. Apparently, they didn't bag any birds at all, and it's not clear whether he even fired a single shot. But the aim is obviously to try and represent him as, your ordinary all-American, late middle-aged Midwesterner. Because Harris is doing so badly among men in general. A latest ABC Ipsos poll shows support is split down gender lines, with women voting 60-40 to Harris and men breaking for Trump by a similar margin. Trump needs white women who supported him in greater numbers in 2020 than in 2016, but also black men. And today he said that former President Obama's call last week for black men to support Harris based solely on her skin color rather than her policies is deeply insulting. And he's right. I mean, certainly Fox News have managed to find plenty of black men saying that they're going to vote for Trump because, they don't vote entirely on identity lines. But it's interesting the extent to which it has become almost a major factor now in American politics.
Yeah, it really is. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to this election cycle being over. These next 3 weeks can't go fast enough for me, but I think it'll leave us a lot to talk about, a lot to look at, and of course, there'll be the fallout from whatever the selection/election turns out to be.
I mean, some of the reporting, I'm sorry, it's just the problem we've got. I think this is somebody called Ramon Antonio Vargas writing in The Guardian. Donald Trump said today he does not expect chaos from his supporters on the day of the 5th of November election. Asked on Fox News Sunday Morning Futures a couple of hours ago if he anticipated chaos from those who support him over Kamala Harris, he said, "No, I don't think so, not from the side that votes for Trump." And then this is the so-called journalism. Supporters of Trump aimed a deadly attack on Congress weeks after he lost the presidency to Joe Biden in 2020. The US Capitol attack, launched after he told his supporters to fight like hell, was a desperate attempt to prevent congressional certification of the US president's victory. Hundreds of participants have been indicted on federal crimes pertaining to the violence. And Trump himself was charged with illicitly trying to overturn his 2020 defeat in the lead up to the attack. I mean, talk about, modern myth making and Bob, just bold lying. It's absolutely reprehensible. The January the 6th protest looked like a busload of the sort of American tourists you get down the road from here in Glastonbury, just ambling Midwesterners angry at the theft of the election, which was as plain as day. And yet this entirely phony narrative has been synthesized. It's absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah, it really is. And we've seen it's weird, the way that the mass media, like you're describing, we see it across the board, ABC, NBC, MSNBC, all these things, all doing their best propaganda attempt that they can to solidify that narrative at every opportunity they
That's
get.
right.
They never, ever talk about the increasing number of feds that have been identified as being there. I mean, we're at a point now, there was just a release a couple of weeks ago, indicating that number is even higher than we had assumed during all of the congressional hearings about this and all the stuff that happened on Capitol Hill. There's just mountains and mountains of evidence, videos, stories, that go along with those over 1,000 people that are being held right now for simply having been there in many cases. So it's really weird to see the mass media as a whole rally around this, all these many years later, still pushing that same narrative.
We shouldn't be surprised, really, Hesher. They'll still tell you that Lee Harvey Oswald murdered John Kennedy and 3, 4, 5, 6 buildings collapsed on 9/11 because of Muslim hijackers and every other garbage. And you need to wear a mask, and the injections are totally necessary, effective, and harmless. It's just lie based upon lie. But we've got used to it by now. But
Right.
It's just sickening when you see it like that. Revived again.
Right. Revived and re-weaponized against the people.
Re-weaponized at every available opportunity.
Right. Well, let's shift a little bit here, Basil. We got some clips we're gonna go through, and first off, let me just get your take on the events of the last week or so, because last Sunday we were kind of at a tipping point with what's going on with Israel. Their incursion into southern Lebanon, a lot of missile strikes happening, a lot of wondering if Iran was gonna, do something similar as they did last week. I mean, just generally, what have you seen in the last week or so in the Middle East?
Well, more and more absolutely unspeakable horror. Yesterday and the day before, having ordered 400,000 people to leave northern Gaza, the Israelis have turned it into an extermination zone. I've seen some of the most awful, when we run out of words, but dead bodies piled up in the streets, tanks firing into the shells of the remaining civilian buildings where people are sheltering, machine gunning anybody that moves, drones overhead. I mean, the most hellish possible scenario you can imagine. This after patients were ordered out of the Al Adnan hospital last week. I mean, the arrogance is just absolutely breathtaking that the Israelis think they can just order Lebanese people out of their homes and order UN peacekeepers to disappear and order Gazans to move for the umpteenth time in the last year of the carnage. So, all that is extremely depressing and very, very challenging. And a lot of people, myself included, we feel like we're through the looking glass to some extent, because the atrocities are so blatant now, the war crimes piling up on a daily basis. And yet, to go back to the desperate corporate media, they want to talk about anything else. I mean, if you dig around in The Guardian, you can find 25 Palestinians killed today, or it's turned into even more of a hellhole in Gaza. But you've got to go bear it down on the Middle East pages. This should be being screamed from the rooftops. It should be entirely blocking out any other news coverage for the full half hour on all the major networks, because such is the magnitude of the crimes. So we've got, on the one hand, corporate media running cover for these deeply evil people committing these crimes. They're running cover for the totally sick Israeli society that supports them. Apparently 3 of the top 10 records in the Israeli charts at the moment are openly calling for genocide. The whole society is completely disintegrated into a bloodthirsty collection of gangsters and psychopaths. That's all it is now. They just want to kill everyone, including the Irish. One commentator said, "Let's bomb Ireland and then napalm it," and it wasn't joking, of course. So the atrocities are worse than ever. It's very, very difficult to go on social media because one is endlessly confronted by the sheer horror of it. You can only sort of take about 10 minutes of it, before I have to turn away. What can I do, and then at the same time, of course, we've all wondered where the red lines are, but we've still got, this last couple of days, for example, the Foreign Secretary, British Foreign Office, refusing a visa to Mandla Mandela, Nelson Mandela's grandson, who was going to come to the UK to speak at various Palestine solidarity events. And usually South Africans don't require a visa. The Foreign Office suddenly decided a few hours before he was due to get his plane that he had to have a visa, and then probably refused to grant him one. So this sort of Zionist malfeasance is the only way to describe it, which unfortunately infects the UK national security state seemingly down to its core, continues to this day. And Jonathan Cook, in his latest article, refers to a conversation he had with a senior European diplomat some years ago now, where he said, what atrocities does Israel have to commit in order to produce a response from the European Union or the West? Where are the red lines? And this diplomat said, I'm afraid there are none. And that's what's become abundantly clear and becomes more so every day. There are no red lines. There are no red lines for the United States. Amos Hochstein, for example, the so-called special envoy to the Middle East. I mean, he's a former soldier in the IDF. I mean, how can anyone like that be an honest broker? And basically, although publicly wanting to, maintain this fiction of wanting a ceasefire, the US gave the green light for the invasion of Lebanon and the continued bombing. Several thousand innocent Lebanese civilians have now been killed. And again, this should be, totally dominating the news cycle. But just so what? Who cares? Well, we've entered a new Twilight Zone era where people are being conditioned to accept the mass murder of civilians by the Zionist regime with the full support of the United States and the United Kingdom, with just a few sort of mollifying voices on the fringes, just to give the illusion that somehow this is not what's wanted. But as the Palestinian American scholar at Columbia University, Masood said, speaking to Electronic Art in the week, he said, when Israel says it upholds Western values, they mean it. What are Western values? Well, genocide. Look at the Iraq War, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis killed, nobody ever brought to justice. The same people still in power in the neocon foreign policy establishment in Washington. So when Israel says it has the same values as the West, they're right. If the West had different values from Israel, then it would have put a stop to the killing. By now, every Israeli embassy in Europe and the United States would be closed, and every ambassador sent home, and swinging sanctions, and no more money, diplomatic arms, or anything else. But of course, that isn't the case. So therefore, of course, they're the same values. It's just a kind of very, very vaguely good cop, bad cop routine, but it ends in the same place. So it's just, every week, as I say, we seem to sort of double down with the horror, and with the total abandonment of the so-called principles, morals, and all the rest of it, on which we've always liked to kid ourselves that our society and our world is founded. They're all completely and utterly abandoned. There are some rays of hopes. There's the Hind Rajab Foundation I came across this week, which seeks justice for her and all the other Palestinian victims. Tremendous documentaries come out about the scale of the suffering and the horrors in Gaza. So there's a global awareness of what's going on that's growing and will continue to grow. There's no going back from this for Israel in the eyes, ears, hearts and minds of all right-thinking, decent people. It's a pariah. It always will be a pariah. It's now rightly, of course, perfectly acceptable to say that Zionism needs to be completely dismantled, because you can't have a sort of homicidal maniac state anywhere in the world, let alone in the Middle East. It just seems to sort of want to kill everybody it possibly can with total impunity. I mean, this is really, really demonic stuff. So, it's a challenge. We're in a global constitutional crisis. Are we going to apply the rule of law equally to all? That would mean the arrest of Biden and Harris and Sunak and Starmer and the rest, as well as the entire Israeli cabinet. Or, are we going to continue down this path, which, quite frankly, Hesher leads to hell, because that's where we are at the moment.
And isn't it amazing that the place we have to go to basically just 3 social media sites to see the actual horror and the atrocity? It's Telegram, it's TikTok, and it's X. These seem to be the primary places where people like us can go and dive into what I've referred to as the doom scroll for a long time, the infinite doom scroll. But
it really is a doom scroll now. That we used to say that sort of rather ironically, because it was,
now it's like the death scroll. Like today I had to see an X-ray of an 11-year-old's cranium with a 5.56 round embedded in the middle of it. I can't even I can't even paraphrase the amount of manglement, death, destruction, murder that I have seen in the last year. And that's on top of what I was already monitoring in the Ukrainian conflict, which was horrific enough to see trench warfare in 2024, to see people forced to the front of a battle line that they know they're not going to survive. But at least, that's combatants, it's a sad story. Too many Ukrainians dead, and unnecessarily. But this is a completely next level thing to witness a genocide in real time on social media. You can see it. It looks completely visceral, especially when you compare it to the type of media that would come out of Syria during the Syrian conflict. You'd have a lot of that curated white helmet style propaganda stuff, fake blood, fake fake scenarios. And here it's just like, you just need to look. You don't even need to look at the gore. You just need to look at the town. Look at the town before and after. There was a town. Now there's not. It's just rubble. And then you see these horrors in the feeds, and it's like, where is the mass media? They're clearly running cover.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, they're not allowed in to a large extent because, when they do get in, even, dyed-in-the-wool Zionist reporters who believe in the state of Israel, just, I wouldn't quite say honest BBC or ABC reporters, but just, anyone, frankly, would be absolutely taken aback by the scale of the horror, so, let alone independent media journalists or something. So that's obviously very deliberate. But nevertheless, what corporate media sources should be doing is doing everything they can to make contact with independent journalists, a few that are still alive, that haven't been murdered, to find out what's actually going on, but they can't be bothered. It's as simple as that. They don't want to shine a spotlight on the horror. And this has been the case with Israel's dispossession and genocide of the Palestinians for many, many decades. The downplaying of the incursions in the West Bank for years, and the bombings in Gaza is systemic to our media. But of course, as soon as you link the fact that the death of Palestinians is massively, massively downgraded and underplayed by corporate media, as soon as you link that fact to ownership of the corporate media by Zionist billionaires, well, then you're indulging in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. But, the simple fact is that whenever any Israelis get killed or Israel gets attacked, even when there are no civilian casualties, it's, look at 8 Israelis died, 4 Israeli soldiers died, 1,200 on October the 7th, even though most of them were killed by the Hannibal Directive by Israel itself. So we've had this absolutely, really very, very sinister, inflation of Israeli casualties as being more important. That's the thing. Israeli lives are more important, more sacred, more valuable, more holy, whatever you like, than Palestinian lives or Lebanese lives. That's the way the media has been presenting the conflict for decades. It's as simple as, but as I say, you start talking about linking that to who runs the media, and be very, very careful. Hesher.
You brought up the journalism aspect. Let's touch on this for a second. Over at the Gray Zone, Israel jails Gray Zone's Jeremy Lafredo, releases him pending investigation. This just broke a couple days ago. Criminal case against the American reporter fell apart after an Israeli journalist testified that his own article containing Lafredo's full video report had cleared military censorship, yet Israel refuses to let Lafredo leave the country. So they've ordered him released from jail. And Israeli soldiers arrested the Jewish American reporter and 3 other journalists at a checkpoint in the West Bank just on October 8th. According to one of the jailed reporters, Deandre, the soldiers blindfolded them tightly, roughed them up, drawing guns on them at one point, and hauled them off to detention in Jerusalem. Quote, the soldiers illegally requested that the journalists hand in their phones, and when they refused, the soldiers pointed a gun at one of the journalists, hit him with their hands and the barrel of a gun, then dragged him out of the car and slammed him onto the concrete. When lying on the ground, they pointed 2 guns at his head. The rest of the journalists exited the car, and the military raided it, confiscating phones, cameras, and personal items. So, a lot of people have been upset about that story, and obviously they're reporting on it over at thegrayzone.com. But I mean, these guys are lucky that that they're even released from jail at this point. I would say it sounds like they're not going to be allowed to leave, so this is not a done deal.
No, I mean, and supposedly Joe Biden comes out with all this garbage about journalism is sacred, it should never be a crime, and all the rest of it. But of course, none of these things apply to Israel. I mean, they can kill him for all Biden cares, or for all that you'll get out of the State Department. I mean, this is what I mean about there's no red lines. 75, 80 years of Zionist infiltration of the United States and administration, body politic, Washington, corporate media, all the rest of it means that Israel can do what it likes. People need to get this through their heads. Surely the rest of the American journalists, surely that will prompt some sort of pushback from this. Forget it. Nothing's going to happen. The U.S. administration needs to be de-Zionized every bit as much as Tel Aviv does.
Yeah, and the issue with Lafredo was that he was there visiting to see what the actual damage from the Iranian missile strike was. So the fact that he and his colleagues were cuffed and stuffed and brutalized and had their devices all taken away really shows how far Israel will go to maintain that narrative that the strike wasn't that bad. Nothing to see here. It's over now. They didn't hurt us. They didn't damage anything. Yet we've got entire areas of the map that are fuzzed out on satellite photos at this point. And they're jailing and abusing journalists who are there to show the damage. So, this is the length they'll go. And we saw this in Ukraine also with Gonzalo Lira, which unfortunately ended much worse than this, although this is not over yet. But, again, that highlights just how far the mass media and governments and militaries and intelligence assets will go to keep control of a narrative in the mainstream.
Yeah, and it's seems that every week that goes by we're reaching, we're plumbing new depths, doesn't it, Hesher, in terms of the media's approach to all this.
Yeah.
Where's the support amongst mainstream journalists? But the grey zone journalist has been arrested. We've started to see a little bit more pushback in the State Department briefing room. That dreadful Miller bloke has been called out a couple of times. One could only hope that the volume's turned up there. But I mean, the Israelis have been acting with impunity now for 50, 60, 70 years. And they show absolutely no signs of stopping. In fact, Patrick, who's in Rome, by the way, or rather he's at a very attractive looking villa on the outskirts of Rome for a conference this weekend. He shared a post showing one of the hardline Israeli leaders at some kind of rally, which looks and feels, and from the rhetoric sounds like an end times cult. They're talking in the West Bank about going in for the finish, wanting to basically go in and murder the remaining Palestinians in the West Bank, steal everything, steal all the towns, burn everything to the ground, kill everybody. That's the agenda. The agenda in Lebanon is to steal territory. They've started advertising for yet to be built settlements in South Lebanon in stolen land. They want to create a so-called buffer zone, of course, which effectively just means stealing more territory. Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, has been advertising condominiums on the beach in Gaza on more stolen land. So if anybody thinks Trump is America first, Israel comes first, always does, with him and with everybody else. So, as I say, it's 70 years of defying international law. Why? I don't know why we had to have the ICJ make this ruling that the occupation was illegal. Everybody's always known the occupation is illegal, but anyway, they went through a whole process of submitting evidence and ruled it's illegal. What's going to happen? Absolutely nothing whatsoever. So either the international community grows a pair, as it were, and you're seeing some minor little sort of pushback from the likes of Macron saying, "Oh, perhaps we ought to stop sending them weapons," or we're in a very, very bad place indeed. And we're going to see increasing, sorry about that, we're going to see increasing crackdowns on journalists and dissidents in the West. That's what's going to come next.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, look at, Mandela refused entry, and then, in the UK, Sarah Wilkinson, Richard Medhurst, Craig Brown, have all been roughed up. Scott Ritter was arrested, wasn't he? And there will be attempts to effectively outlaw Palestine solidarity one way or another. Basically, you've got to go along with the genocide, or shut up, at the very least, or we're gonna come for you, claiming you're an anti-Semite or whatever other garbage you want to come up with.
Right, of course. And we've got this one as well. I want to bring up U.S. military veteran arrested by Israeli forces in occupied West Bank. Michael Jacobson was accompanying a Palestinian farmer in Masfer Yatta when he was arrested and threatened with imprisonment. And so, we keep seeing this, and this Michael Jacobson was in that village in the Hebron governorate when he and other activists, as well as Palestinian landowners, were approached by Israeli soldiers. The ISM said that the farmer Jacobson was accompanying was facing daily harassment, attacks, and invasions of his private land by Israeli settlers and occupation forces. Soldiers demanded their identification, and later Israeli police were called, who then arrested Jacobson and took him into custody at an interrogation center. Quote, "This interrogation center is home to the special task force created by the notorious Israeli minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. The task force was created as a response to some states, including the U.S., sanctioning violent settlers." So there again, we see just a complete crackdown on a big human interest story. If that was going on in America or somewhere else, at least at some point in our history, this would have been major news. But now, the government that we send 2,000 pallets of 2,000-pound bombs to on the regular and billions of dollars is out there doing these kind of activities to journalists. It's disgraceful.
Yeah, but you can use whatever language you want. Urging restraint. They're always talking about, aren't they?
Yeah.
Limited ground operation. We've entered, as I say, a twilight world where language has become completely and utterly meaningless, because basically, you've got. Even to call Israel a rogue state is an insult to rogue states. Frankly, people talk about North Korea being a rogue state, but they don't just routinely murder thousands of children, shooting them in the head. He said, so this is beyond a rogue state, this pariah state or anything like that. We're talking about, something really psychotic, something really, really evil with the way Israel is acting at the moment. It's always been there, the potential for this, and now it's starting to be externalized, starting to see it all the time. An awful lot of people simply want to look away. I know a lot of people who cannot bear to look at what's actually going on, to take it in, because they find it too disturbing on a personal level. I can understand that, but that's exactly what the Israelis want you to do. They want you to disengage from it so that they can quietly get on with their extermination campaign.
Right. And they don't even want. It's so strange to me, Basil, the way that the media and the politicians will pick and choose when they want to reference the United Nations. And this particular set of events has really just made it like crickets. This is just pure crickets when it comes to some of the things that the UN is saying. Let me put this on the screen real quick here. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on the details of this because they are horrific. But there's this report, and we mentioned it a few weeks ago. Ruckus and I talked about this here at Sunday Wire. United Nations General Assembly. This was put out on September 11th of this year, 2024, and it's called the Report of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. So, you've got a 24-page PDF here, but one of the things that it details, you can go look it up yourself if you want to get into the horror, but it details UN report, confirms the horrific details of sexual violence and other things against hostages, people in administrative detention, and it's death, abuse, torture of women, all kind. I don't even want to get into the types of sexual violence, a lot of humiliation, and interrogation, Abu Ghraib style stuff going on in some of these administrative detention camps. And again, you would think that would be something that the mass media would be all over, but nothing, just crickets.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. This has been the case for decades, Hesher. They keep always talking about the hostages. What about the thousands of hostages in the Israeli torture gulag? When the Palestinians Israelis captured by Hamas and that have been released, they've talked about how well they were treated. They never highlight that at all. That all the coverage is totally biased. It's as simple as that. 100% biased. So we shouldn't expect anything different. But let's run through those clips quickly now. The 4 clips I sent you, 5 clips in all now, if we can, and we'll just watch each one and then comment on them quickly for a moment afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very curious to see how dare you, Greta?
Yes, yeah. Well, credit where credit's due. Let's roll this clip then.
All right.
Germany is silencing and threatening activists who are speaking up against the genocide and occupation in Palestine. The German police claim that it is anti-Semitism to say that Israel should stop bombing children and to say that Palestinians also deserve safety, freedom, and justice. If you can, please show your support to the student movement and encampment in Dortmund and everywhere else where people are facing repression for speaking up against Israel's genocide and full-scale attacks. We will not be silenced.
Well, fair play to her. We've all had our issues with Greta in the past, but frankly, I take my hat off to her. So she's obviously not as controlled as some people thought, or whatever. And frankly, she can't do anything about the weather, but at least she can speak up. And she's got an audience. So I'm very, very pleased to see her doing that.
Yeah, very interesting. That's an interesting turn of events there. It makes me wonder though, like where it fits. Like if clearly she most likely, I should say, most likely she still has PR people behind her and things like that. And it makes me wonder because, like for example, we saw the Biden-Harris administration send relief money to Lebanon, which is so strange to me. So it's like you're sending bombs, munitions, and money to Israel to cause destruction in places like Lebanon, and then you send $15 million or whatever it was to help people in Lebanon. Number one, I wonder where that money actually goes. Number two, is it just simply political optics? Because you see this sort of mealy mouth, like sort of, hey, let's use restraint kind of talking points coming from the Biden-Harris administration. But then as soon as those cameras cut, they'll go over to the AIPAC meeting and say, yeah, we got you. We got you no matter what. So it kind of makes me wonder if this isn't part of the attempt to politicize something in a right-left framework that really should be more in a right-wrong framework.
Yeah, that you make a fair point. You make a fair point. Yeah. I mean, I saw a post on X saying, until recently, Palestine was an issue for liberal college students. I thought, what? Ridiculous. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's it's long since been out of that ghetto. I'm just seeing that apparently because they can't, of course, think of anything else to do with their money, the United States are using your tax dollars, Hesher, to send an anti-missile system to Israel, as well as a crew of US military personnel to operate the system. This is at the direction of the President. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has authorized the deployment of a terminal high-altitude area defense battery and associated crew of US military personnel to help bolster Israel's air defenses following Iran's unprecedented attacks against Israel, and so on and so forth. So as I say, you can't get a cigarette paper between Washington and Tel Aviv. So don't look for one. You know what I mean? Let's run the next clip.
All right, here we go.
I was continually asked by my Palestinian colleagues when I was working how the world can just stand and watch what was happening, watch us sort of, treat all these infants that have been sort of bombed and burnt. And it was very difficult for me because I felt while I was there, and still now even more that I'm back, that's not what everybody I know thinks. Everybody that I know and I speak to thinks that what's going on is absolutely outrageous and it needs to stop it immediately. And unfortunately, I think what's being portrayed to the Palestinians is the party line. And I don't think the government speaks for the majority of us. I really believe that the government does not speak for the majority of us in the UK. And I think that we have to keep making that point. We have to desist. We have to boycott Israel. We have to let this voice out that we are not supporting this party line. We want an end to this. I'm sick of hearing about, Hamas terrorists and Israel's right to defend itself. The bottom line is this is a human rights issue and children are being murdered. It's got to stop.
Yeah.
And we've got to stop supporting it. Yeah, absolutely. That's Dr. Victoria Rose, who has just returned from Gaza and witnessed the most unspeakable horrors. I take my hat off to her for going out there, for the sheer bravery of it. And her words bring total disgrace on the British government. Simple as that. Disgrace.
Yeah. And I like how she points out that the people that she knows, they don't hold this view, this propaganda driven, Western view that, this is somehow a war of defense.
No, I mean, look, you can just use words, whatever words you want. We're all absolutely sick of it. This, Israel's right to defend itself. I mean, as if that means, okay, off you go, just murder and mutilate as many children as you want. It's like, it doesn't add up. It's like, the designation of any resistance as terrorist. I mean, Israelis have spent decades getting resistance characterized as terrorists and decades worming their way into institutions, most notably, of course, the United States, the European Union, and the United Kingdom. So that when this happened, a lot of people would say they've been planning it for a long time, they would have the diplomatic support and cover that they need to carry on with the genocide. Simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's check the next one out here. Here we go.
Why are they working for Israel? Are we crazy? Are we out of our minds? How are we letting this happen? How are we letting it happen? Our money, our representatives, our military, rather than stopping it, is not only allowing it to happen, but is participating willfully in this horrifically, like I said, sadistic form of genocide. And like Zarifa was saying, the genocide didn't start after October 7. And the whole conversation about genocide is really quite interesting. Genocide is a crime. It's a well-defined crime. It was defined in 1949 to a large degree as a result of the genocide of the Jews in Europe by the Nazis. It's a well-defined crime. You can read it. It's not a question of opinion. It's not a question of do we feel about it? Do we feel it's genocidal? Do we not? But this is how the conversation is. Do you feel like it might be genocide? Is your opinion that it might be genocide? Read the law. It's very clear. It fits. It's genocide. They're murdering civilians for almost 8 decades in a systemic way. Systematic erasure of a nation. Systematic erasure of a culture, a history, and a country. That is genocide. There's no opinion here. The law is clear. The evidence is clear. And yet, the money is coming from us. The weapons are coming from us. The support is coming from us. And rather than condemning that, we're asked to condemn the Palestinians, the victims of this. Not the Palestinians are victims. I don't like to use that term. Palestinians are heroes. They're not victims. But who is it that we're supposed to condemn, and why? And there's a lot of similarities to what we're seeing now on campuses. You see the politicians come out. You see the university administrators and presidents come out. Why are they not standing with the students? Why are they not standing with the students? How can they justify to themselves not standing with the students? The students are demanding that their campuses divest from that war machine, that genocide machine. And who are the administrators and the politicians condemning? The students. Who are the police beating up? The students. Who's being arrested and punished and suspended? The students. Once again, we're out of our minds. And we're allowing this to happen? These administrators have a right to suspend these heroes? These encampments will be remembered as one of the greatest moments in the history of these campuses. Your names will be remembered. They'll be put on.
That's
All
Miko Peled, the general's son, who, of course, is a Jewish Israeli by birth, who went through an epiphany. It was actually, I think, in the 80s or 90s, one of the bus bombings by a suicide bomber, back when suicide bombers got through from Gaza and blew up buses in Tel Aviv. And he couldn't understand how anybody could do such a thing. He was a dyed-in-the-wool Zionist. His father was a general in the Israeli army. So he went on a personal journey of discovery as to why would somebody be motivated to do such a thing, you know? And thereby he learned about the monstrous injustices done to the Palestinians over many decades, and is now one of the most articulate and vocal proponents of Palestinian human rights. Miko Peled, well worth following him, looking him up, watching any longer interviews. Patrick interviewed him on Today's News Talk a few months ago, and we'll get him back again some point.
Yeah, it's though
I
people like
met him briefly after a talk in London once, but great guy.
yeah, and people like him make they get themselves canceled real quick from social media and never mind mainstream media, because they make one of the best cases for it. That when someone like that makes the case against genocide and this sort of treatment, this apartheid state, it that really damages the narrative. That's why you see so many Israelis that are against this being completely shut down and taken out of the conversation. And again, the only places you'll find them are on X and TikTok and Telegram, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the same Wire and Today's News Talk, or whatever replaces it. Independent media.
That's right. Yeah, it's you know, Patrick, when he was on last week, he did a kind of his short list of independent outlets that are covering this honestly, and big, you know, hats off and shouts out to all them. But it's, you know, it's such a small number, and there's so much opposition against them. You look at the censorship that we've faced at 21stcenturywire.com. You know, what the Gray Zone's going through, Last American Vagabond. I could go on, you know, all the way down to Gonzalo Lira and this gentleman from the Gray Zone. But you know, it's certainly puts you in the target of the censors and the deplatformers and the depersoners and those that want to scream anti-Semite at the sky and shake their fist.
Oh yeah, I mean, but I'm pleased to say I'm finding more sources on YouTube all the time.
Yeah,
of people that are worth watching. Put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, big shout out to anyone on any platform working this topic, because that certainly makes you unpopular in many large circles. Let's look at this next one here, Basil. We've now got this one. Let's play this.
Good afternoon, Seattle. Welcome to your afternoon newscast. We're here to bring you stories that matter most. Today marks the 16th anniversary of the tragic genocide. Commemorations are being held all around the world.
왜 아무것도 안 하셨어요?
Was hast du während des Völkermords gemacht, Großvater? Mais tout était devant vos yeux. Did you just watch it? أساس ماما بينما يقتل أطفال مثلنا. Why?
Did you just sit and watch it? That's like the age-old question when it comes to World War II. Everybody's so used to asking themselves that, and so few people asking themselves that now about what's going on right in their faces, Basil.
No, absolutely. I think that's very, very effective, that little piece. It comes out of Scandinavia somewhere, judging by the titles at the end. And let's hope that in 16 years' time, we are indeed commemorating the Gaza genocide and, worldwide like that, with museums and commemorations and all the rest of it. And, it's really important to set out a stall like that. They say in the last line there, the Gaza genocide is killing Palestinians, and then replace that with the word humanity, because this is what, we're talking about with respect to people wanting to bury their head in the sand and, look away and, not engage with it because it's too distressing. But we've got to call it for what it is. We're going to keep using the term genocide at every available opportunity. Miko Pellet said sadistic genocide. It is. At what point are we allowed to start talking about the sheer sadism of what's going on, the sheer evil of it? So it's very, very encouraging that there are people out there making little films like that. All power to them. We need more of that.
That's right. And we've got a huge grip of people right now watching on YouTube, watching on X, watching on Rumble, chatting in the Sunday Wire chat at 21stcenturywire.com, chatting in the Sunday Wire live chat in the Boiler Room Discord, chatting on Rumble, on Spreaker, on Rockfin. And, that question that's asked, that doesn't go to you folks. I know that you folks are here with us and that you're out there criticizing it. Thank you, Beyond the System, for the comment in there, and everybody, who takes the time to watch this show, to have watched us on today's News Talk. By the way, maybe some exciting things coming with today's News Talk, potential relaunch. You can see some rumblings of that on the X. So get on out there and check that out. We're excited about it and waiting to learn more ourselves. But a lot of people are, Basil. This is it's not enough, and what's happening is horrific. And I just wish these conversations could have been had a decade ago. When we first started doing Sunday Wire, and when I first met you and Patrick, and we had like Gilad Atzmon on, and we started, going down this trail and learning about it from different people's perspectives. It was I don't know. I don't want to call it fringe to talk about it. It seems like being against war, genocide, and apartheid should not be fringe, but it was considered fringe. And now, look at all these people we've got watching the show with us right now. It's a growing number, but is it enough? Is it, too little, too late? That's sort of where I'm at with it right now. Like it's I don't ever want to feel as fatalistic as to say it's too late, but when I look at the devastation of the last 12 months here wrought on civilians, women and children in particular, non-combatants, it's hard to not, take the black pill and be like, man, how were we not on this 10 years ago in larger numbers?
Yeah, no, I hear you. A lot of people have been screaming about it for a long, long time, but it's been pushed to the back burner so often that it resulted in October the 7th. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
You can make as many documentaries. John Pilger's Palestine is still the issue that was made before October the 7th. But of course, like we said, the diplomatic cover that the US and the UK have been running for Israel for decades means that, although the occupation is illegal and should come to an end, they're allowed to get away with it. They're allowed to get away with kicking endless so-called peace processes into touch, from when we've still got a situation where the official US position is a two-state solution. Same applies to the UK, European Union, two-state solution. What a load of total garbage. What Palestinian state? Where? So when the killing finally stops, God help us that it does stop at some point sooner rather than later, but so there's no sign of it at the moment, unfortunately. I mean, so remember, it's months and months since there was all this shuttle diplomacy looking for a ceasefire. Well, the brink of a ceasefire. Tony Blinken's in Cairo talks, and they go and murder Ismail Haniyeh, The Israelis have never wanted a ceasefire. They never wanted a Palestinian state. They want to kill as many as possible and ethnically cleanse the rest. It's as simple as that. Everything else is just window dressing. But sooner or later, the killing will have to stop, and then there'll be a reckoning. First of all, the world will, a wider world will get even more of an idea of what's happened in Gaza. And secondly, Western governments will be hopefully forced at some point to confront their own lies about this myth of the two-state solution. How that's all going to play out, remains to be seen. And of course, crucially, the question of justice. The question of bringing the perpetrators of these war crimes to justice. That's what has to happen. Otherwise, we're in a dreadful place.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think of the Ukrainian conflict too. I see people in the chat talking about that as well. It's like with Ukraine, we saw more than one moment where there was a chance to end this. And what do you see? You see UK and US diplomats and politicians going in and interfering with those things. You see the shutdown of anything. You see the refusal of treaties, and this is, we've seen this a good at least 3 or 4 or probably more times with Ukraine, but this has been going on with Israel Palestine for decades. That people, this goes all the way back to the formation of Israel and
absolutely
the assassination of JFK, right? I mean,
absolutely. Well, that abysmal partition plan to begin with, so the writing was on the wall from then on. But let's play this clip. I don't know if you've got the 5th one I sent you.
I do. Yeah, I think this might dovetail nicely into what we're talking about here. Let's take a look. This is a somewhat viral TikTok from someone named, his handle is at Daniel Astrophysics. Let's take a look at this one.
See this? This is what's happened because we've let our country be run by fools for the last 30 years. They've stolen trillions of dollars from us, the taxpayers. They've done no investment in our nation, and they've empowered billionaires to literally wipe the middle class off the map. I'm a physics professor at UCLA, and I was paid so poorly last year that I lost my life savings and I had to move all of my stuff into public storage. This is the reality for this nation. We have degraded to an idiocracy where the United States is no longer a great nation with great leadership. Our country's roads are crumbling. Our infrastructure is a disgrace. And all the leaders who promised to fix this have not delivered. Congress is a failure. The presidency has been a failure. And the only people who are getting money are the weapons manufacturers who are paying off our members of Congress to build more bombs and sell them to Israel and other nations as third parties under the guise that it's for our national defense. But it's not. It's for money. There are weapons manufacturers and people who are involved in this military industrial complex that are manipulating and maniacally fooling our nation into giving up our own greatness for their own quick, rich, get rich quick scheme. Please follow me and support me for more. Thank you.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's why if Harris loses, it's why she'll lose. People aren't fooled by the fact that the United States has been kind of hollowed out, hasn't it? It's become a war economy over the last 25 years. Most people struggling to get by, pay these exorbitant rents and tax dollars, as he says there, sent overseas, billions squandered on God knows what. What is it, $35 trillion now, the national debt? And it's just, and nothing works either. I saw somebody posting on X saying, in Japan, everything works. Staff are polite, the escalators work, the trains run on time, there's very good rail network. The United States used to be impressive. I remember visiting in the early 1980s and being very impressed by the infrastructure in the schools we visited, but that ain't the case anymore, is it? It's in large parts now look like a third world country.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad. We've lost entire cities. I know so many people that won't even travel into cities anymore for things that they want to do, and the ones that do realize realize that they go there at their own risk, and what they're have their head on a swivel, or B, have their head in the sand, and continue to go into San Francisco, LA, San Diego, New York, Chicago, other places, and think, that they're still living in America, from 15 years ago or 20 years ago. And it is very much not the case. We've got homelessness like we've never seen, drug addiction like we never imagined. So like something out of a science fiction movie, like in places like Philly, where you've got trank dope, hordes of trank dope zombies, the poor unfortunate humans who have allowed themselves to become addicted to fentanyl mixed with horse tranquilizers that causes death and body rot that doctors have no idea how to even counteract. I mean, we've literally got people rotting in the streets and crime running rampant, and and state elements of state government, in the DA's offices, in the governor's house, who support this reformation of justice, into a system where somebody can do great bodily harm to someone, or steal their belongings, or kick their pregnant girlfriend and cause the death of a baby, and DAs have no interest in pursuing them. They let them out of jail on no bail. We let 17 to 22 million people into the country on misdemeanors, being here illegally, and none of them are going to show up to any court dates ever, and they're all being encouraged to vote now. So it's just not what it was. Schools are indoctrination places where they encourage little kids to chop off their body parts and destroy any hope of developing a natural, mature adult sense of sexuality whatsoever. Just completely skull plugged. So this is not the place that we grew up in, and it's not the place. And if it is the place you grew up in, you're a little younger than me, and I'm sure sorry it happened. We certainly have been shaking our fists at the sky and the politicians for years to try to make it not happen, but here we are. So yeah, it's an absolute mess, Basil.
100%. That was a very neat little rundown, Hesher, I must say. Yeah, it's very, very sad, and the divorce between Congress and the ordinary people, let alone the Senate, is what's making this so egregious, really. Can you tell us why more of these creeps don't get voted out regularly, given that they don't seem to have any interest whatsoever in helping the ordinary American public? How come this? Because it seems to be a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of
perpetuating system of corruption and malfeasance.
Right. Our country's been corrupted. We've had that corruption and malfeasance enter the political system and the corporate system and the educational system and the pharmaceuticals. Anything that hasn't government or corporate or intelligence or finance oriented cartel around it has been completely infiltrated and completely corrupted, from the middle up, and now from the top down, all the way down to people in your local school council meetings, or your city council meetings, or whatever. So, and it's happened over time. It's happened because of lobbyists. It's happened because of all the dual citizenship that we see, back to our original topic here. It's largely happened because of AIPAC and their vast political and financial influence. It's happened because of a modern system of propagandic feedback loops that was amplified by the entrance of social media, amplified by the Smith-Mundt Act that was changed and basically trashed during Obama's administration, which made it completely legal for our government to propagandize to us, because that's what we get now. We get indoctrination, we get propaganda, we get all the malice of bots and trolls and troll farms and paid operatives on social media, and then social media itself running cover for the government and the intel agencies and the military industrial complex by doing censorship against us and lawfare against us and against any politician who has any semblance of populism. It's also been done because they've made getting elected a rich man's game. You can't do it anymore. I've talked to so many independent, sort of America First style political hopefuls from California, from New Jersey, from Georgia, from all over the place. I've interviewed dozens of these people, and they all had a campaign that, if you're a normal sandwich eating American, as my friend Sumo likes to say, shout out to Mystical American Patriot Society, then, you don't have a chance. You absolutely do not have a chance for a career in federal government for sure, state government at the high levels, most certainly, of making any influence. We've got our Thomas Massey, as one example, who doesn't seem to be completely captured. But, when you look at the way our Senate votes and our House brings bills to the floor, it's very obvious that we're not being represented. So we just don't
No, that's
have
right.
representation anymore.
No, it's very, very disappointing indeed. I mean, the two-party system, the duopoly, Citizens United, the stranglehold on the media, take your pick, all these factors play into it, don't they? I mean, ultimately, the sheer corrupting influence of money in politics.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, So, you sound like a socialist or something, do you know what I mean? But,
yeah.
What do you want? This, look at where you are now,
I've also, and I know you have too. You talked to Eric Rice on your last broadcast there. I was myself and Eric Rice and a couple other great guests. But between us and many of our colleagues, we've talked to experts in finance, experts in political theory, experts that have amazing ideas that are completely feasible to do things like remove us from the oppression of the Federal Reserve, which we all know is not federal nor has any reserves.
Yes.
To change the way that we do districting, such that we would have an absolute, a near absolute, evenly distributed set of representatives in this country, and we don't have that whatsoever. You can look back to the Los Angeles City Council. There was a big scandal in the Los Angeles City Council back in 22 or 23 about zoning and redistricting, and it was between African American legislator and a Latino legislator, and tapes were, hidden tapes were made and were leaked, and the absolute racism displayed. And let's not forget, everyone on these LA councils are Democrats. There are no Republicans whatsoever. It's just like, how close to the center is your Democrat, maybe? But just these racist means of taking power, redistricting, a lot of kickbacks that are available. Some places need a new sports arena, and there's tens of millions of dollars involved in that, and some places are looking to regentrify, again, tens of millions, billions of dollars in activities like this, political favors, these kind of things. Like, this could all be eliminated if this country actually wanted to have sound fiscal backing, proper environmental care, and that kind of thing. But no, every single thing has been representation. Like we don't have representation in this country anymore. It's down to like
That's right.
social media personalities, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good points, Hesher.
With
Well, I think we're go on.
Yeah. And then these people have millions of dollars. Back to your original question, these people get millions of dollars in backing, and they make it impossible for people like that we speak with to actually represent people in this country and actually make a difference, and treat this this political environment as one that represents the actual population here.
Yeah, grassroots politics has become effectively impossible, other than on a sort of very local community level, hasn't it? Unless, of course, like Barack Obama or somebody, you effectively get selected by the oligarchy and groomed for high office because they've decided that your face fits, whether you're directly recruited by the national security state or just the path is eased for you. Of course, we've got another case in point with the dreadful Keir Starmer in Britain at the moment. There are people, and these people serve to sort of maintain the illusion. Someone like Obama maintains the illusion, you see, or Kamala Harris for that matter, that actually, yes, you can make it. Yes, anybody can be president of the United States.
Come from a middle-class family.
Black woman, senile old jerk, Biden, whoever. You can be president, but actually it's, that isn't the case at all.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. Hello? Can you hear me? You got me, Baz? You might need to reconnect. Folks in the chat, let me know you still got me. Let's see here. Let me just tell Basil. Let me just pull him out real quick here and then put him back in. Basil, are you there? Nope. Hey, Baz, can you hear me?
Hello.
Can you hear me,
Baz? I
Baz?
lost sound there. Okay.
All right. Hopefully you saw my message there, and Basil will be right back with us here in a moment, or maybe the sound will kick back in for him. But here we are. Yeah, Basil asks, how did this happen? And I think, that really kind of says a lot, and I didn't even get into just the general pummeling of everybody using media-based, trauma-based mind control. And I could take you back to 2020, the events of 2020 and 2021 as a great example, but I'm going to try not to dive too far into that. Basil, are you back with us? Can you hear us? No. All right. Yeah, Basil, I'm not sure what to tell you, man. If you can't hear me, we're going to have some issues. All right. Well, okay. So we got one more clip here. I'm going to go ahead and Basil, you can try again if you want. I can't hear him either now. So let's see. Okay. Yeah, Mike says their mic isn't connected. Let me just tell Basil that real quick here. All right, mic isn't connected. Says our technological interface here. So Basil, we'll try again if you want there. Can you hear me now? All right.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Anyway, I think we were about to wrap up. Apologies to viewers and listeners for the gremlins in the machine.
Yeah, a couple ghosts in the machine. You got one more clip here, Basil. Let me roll this one out for you,
yeah.
and then we'll wrap it up here. This looks
I
like
think this is Michael Rappaport today.
Yes, it does look like Michael Rappaport. Let's see what this guy has to say.
We, the Jewish people, we are the chosen people. The Jews are the chosen people, and it is so apparent when you're in Israel, the Jewish land, and you're with the Jewish people of Israel, how magical we are. That's biblical shit, okay? That's biblical. You can't debate any of that. I want to make sure everybody knows that the Jews are the chosen people, and that's no disrespect to anything or anybody else, but the Jews are the chosen people, and Israel is ancient Judean Jewish land. We, the Jewish.
All right.
Well, that's the nub of the problem right there, really. I mean, and that's the thing that, Western politicians, media, all the rest of it, refuse to confront, really. Some of them believe in it, Christian Zionism, total contradiction in terms, which somehow has Christians worshipping Israel and worshipping Jewish people rather than Christ. They would go along with that. You see, this is the problem we've got. Simple as that, really. I mean, people talk about, Israel is a white supremacist. No, it's not. Absolutely not. It's Jewish supremacist. It's very open about it there. Regard the likes of you and me as the same as the Palestinians. Simple as that. In the hierarchy of Jewish or Israeli racism, black people come at the bottom. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the idea that any Israeli would take somebody like Lloyd Austin or David Lammy, these diversity hires that are at the forefront of UK and US representation, the idea that any Israeli takes them seriously for a moment is a joke. Well, as soon as they've gone out the door, they're laughing at them. They really do consider them little better than apes. And that's exactly the point that Rappaport is making there. But this is exactly the kind of thing that you won't see reported on corporate media. Nobody wants to go there. You see, this is the nub of the problem here. Nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, Basil, let's wind down here. I'll give it to you for any final thoughts. Thanks for being here with us at the Sunday Wire today.
I've enjoyed it. I'm sorry about the glitch towards the end there, but yeah, I mean, globally, they always say it's darkest before the dawn, and we can only hope so, because it's very dark at the moment, isn't it? But look, Donald Trump says he will end the war in Ukraine. At least that means one possible flashpoint for World War III would be taken off the table. I've seen today friend and colleague Matt Nielsen saying that Olaf Scholz is chucking Zelensky under the bus, not supplying him with any more heavy weaponry. It looks like that conflict might finally be winding down. Of course, thousands of people killed, no obvious purpose whatsoever, lots of blood on Boris Johnson's hands. And then we have the intractable situation of the genocide in the Middle East. And on that score, I'm afraid Trump and Bobby Kennedy and the rest of his cohorts don't appear on the face of it to be better than anybody else. In fact, arguably worse. The only sliver of hope that we can cling to, because I've seen even Brother Nathaniel Kaplan, who is one of Israel's most fiercest critics, endorse Trump, is that, he thinks that, Trump is playing nice with Miriam Adelson and the ultra-Zionists that he hangs out with, because he knows he's got to in order to get into power. But then once in power, he will bring an end to the carnage and may even seek some kind of justice. But whether or not that goes as far as seeing his pal Bibi Netanyahu in the stocks or in The Hague, that remains to be seen. But we have to remain with faith and hope. Hesher, simple as that.
Absolutely. That's a great way to leave it, Basil. Again, thank you for joining us today. This has been episode 519 of the Sunday Wire here with myself and Basil Valentine. Basil, have a great rest of the weekend here. I know it's getting into the later hours of the weekend for you, and thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to being with you again real soon.
Thanks very much, Ash. I've enjoyed it enormously, and cheerio, everyone. Have a
All
great
right.
week.
All right. You too. There goes Basil Valentine. Thank you for being here with us. We'd love to have your support. You can find out how at 21stcenturywire.com. There's a support 21 Wire link up there. You can subscribe and become a member at 21wire.tv. We've got all the support links you could possibly need there. And please share this out. Please repost it on X. Please share the Rumble link, the Rockfin link, the Spreaker link, the 21stcenturywire.com link. And shortly after the show, there'll be a show page up at alternatecurrentradio.com as well. We also have the Sunday screening happening. This week's Sunday screening over at 21st Century Wire is Forgotten Island, paragliding in Socotra. This is part of our weekly documentary film, curated documentary film series that we've got over there, curated by the editorial team at 21 Wire. And this one's about a group of professional test pilots exploring the remote and rarely visited island of Socotra off the coast of Yemen in the heart of the Middle East. So watch the film. It's up there on the site. Watch it at your leisure. It's embedded there from a YouTube link, so you can pause and do all the things you need to do. And check this out as these test pilots, you can join them as they thermal up to 1,000 meters over the Indian Ocean, battle 40-kilometer winds, and fly from the longest caves in the Orient. Socotra is a sanctuary for flora and fauna, with beautiful, distinct landscapes as the region is again plunged into turmoil. This is a 37-minute documentary, so you can even watch it on 2-speed if you're so inclined and get through it pretty quickly. It includes spectacular aerial footage from one of the few remaining flying secrets left on the Earth from before the present conflict. You can watch that on the Sunday screening. Thanks everybody in the 21stcenturywire.com chat room. Sorry I wasn't able to hang out in there with you today, but I see you and I appreciate all your commentary and everything. And everybody that reshares this on X and YouTube and Rumble and Rockfin and Spreaker. Thank you for doing that. We really appreciate that. That helps us out a lot. Get in there and like the videos and do all that stuff. That engagement helps us grow very clearly. And to any of the listeners and viewers that have thrown anything in the swear jar at Alternate Current Radio or signed up at 21st Century Wire to support via 21wire.tv, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. If you've been considering that, it's a good time to support both platforms. 21 Wire and ACR need your help. And we'll be back again next week with another Sunday Wire, doing our best to keep it going in Patrick's absence here. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to get with us today, but we'll look forward to having him back as soon as possible. And have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.